How's it going, you beautiful people? I hope you're all safe and healthy and finishing models every single day. Tonight we're gonna take a look at how I painted those big fat Tiger One exhaust pipes, which are pretty bland with almost no surface details and as such might be more difficult to paint than one would think. Hey guys, it's Uncle Nightshift, and before we start I'd just like to mention that there are easier ways to paint exhausts, and if someone decides to just stipple them with different rust tones such as these life color paints, the results will be pretty much amazing. I just wanted to make them less rusty while also giving them more texture, so maybe someone will find this video useful. So the first step was to mix a medium gray tone from Tamiya acrylics, which I mixed in roughly the same amount. The light gray tone on the exhausts is Mr. Surfacer, which is a light gray colored primer. However, I needed a slightly darker surface and it also must be totally matte, and Tamiya paints are perfect for that. Next is incinerated white from Life Color. It's an off-white color and it's also very matte. This paint was diluted with tap water and applied with a kitchen sponge around the central part of each exhaust. This effect represents heat-affected steel. It's actually kind of interesting, but if you look up images of used car exhausts, you'll notice the light gray / off-white color on most of them. Now for some rust texture with Vallejo Flat Brown. I also applied this color with a kitchen sponge to create the initial layer of corrosion. Exhausts that are more complicated and cluttered with details such as flanges, bolts and other stuff are easier to paint, but in this case we must create a lot of fake textures and the sponge method is ideal for that because it's fast and easy. But here's the tricky part. We must keep in mind that almost half of the pipe will be hidden behind an armored cover, so it's important to make the visible parts as interesting as possible. I didn't realize that before, leaving the interesting part hidden and the boring section in plain sight, so I had to strip the exhaust and start all over again. So yeah, this time I'm keeping the boring part around the center where the armored covers will be, and it actually makes sense because here's where the hottest fumes would collect. Now this looks much better and the textures we achieved so far are also pretty interesting. And we didn't have to use any special tools or techniques, just a piece of torn sponge and basically just two colors. To make the finish even more interesting, I added some German yellow from Ammo. I applied it around the bolts on the top plate, which wasn't exposed to as much hot fumes as the central part. This will also help to blend the top section of the exhaust with the rest of the tank. And I also added a tiny amount around the bottom edge. And now for the enamel rust effects. Most of the work will be done with Streaking Rust from Ammo, which has a nice dark color. I applied it in a pretty heavy amount over the central part where most of the rust texture is present. The edges were then blended with enamel thinner to make a smooth transition. And yeah, also, I didn't seal any layers with varnish. I haven't used any protective varnishes whatsoever, even though I painted all of the effects in one afternoon. So don't worry, you don't need to protect anything, everything is gonna be alright. So with that out of the way, more rust tones were also blended around the edges of the pipe. Basically I added it over all of the dark brown chipping effects. A heavy rust wash was also applied around this part, and as some of us already know, a rust wash applied over a dark gray acrylic base creates some very nice corroded effects. And the same was done on the top cap, but in a very limited amount. To blend the upper half of the pipe with the rest, I diluted the rust paint even more with enamel thinner and applied it in very light amounts, sort of like a rust filter. I also used some enamel thinner to gently blend any sharp edges or tide marks. Now let's take a lighter rust tone such as this light rust wash and apply it with the speckling method. This will add more color to the previously applied dark rust tones, and it will also create more texture. Note how I'm mostly focusing it around the heaviest corrosion. The remaining portions were given just a few specks in order to keep the underlying gray tones clearly visible. It is very easy to overdo the effect, the speckling, so it's better to add less. Then take a step back, look at it for a while, and if you still think it's not enough, then you can add more. I also added some dark brown wash to bring out some of the few surface details, and it not only adds more contrast around these parts, but it also gives the exhaust a grimy and filthy look, which is pretty much exactly what we need. The final touch is to add some black pigments, and for this effect they can be applied in their dry state, so no enamel thinners or anything of that sort are needed. I kept the effect quite subtle because Tiger is not a Soviet tank, and so I brushed them only around the end of the pipe, and also on the bottom of the top plate. I would normally add the smoke residue once the exhausts are glued to the model and weathered with dust and mud with the rest of the tank, but this time I added them now just for the sake of demonstration. And that's it, my friends. Sorry for the shorter video, but I think it's refreshing to share a few simple techniques every now and then. And to be honest, I'm very happy with these exhausts, not only because they look exactly how I envisioned them, but also because I was able to use very simple techniques to achieve this result. Again, they can be painted in an even easier way and the result would look great, but if you're into textures the same way as I am, this might be a good alternative. Just keep in mind almost half of them will be hidden behind the armored covers, so make sure to check it frequently and keep the interesting parts visible. And of course, if your Tiger has those large sheet metal covers which envelop the entire exhaust, then don't even bother, just paint them in some generic rust color, add some black on top, and it'll be more than enough. Anyway, thank you all for watching all the way to the end of the video, and I hope you found it useful or at least interesting to watch. Also a big thank you to my amazing patrons who make this weekly show possible. If you'd like to support the channel for as little as $1 a month, then you can check it out. I'm also offering some interesting rewards if you decide to support me a little more, so if that's something you'd be interested in, then it would help me even more, obviously. But anyway, that's all I have for tonight, so thanks again for watching, keep building models, stay safe, and I'll see you mates the next week. And next week will be about applying dust and mud effects on the Tiger. So yeah, okay, that's all. Cheerios!